Hello, everyone, and welcome to ARM's Innovation Coffee. My name is Robert Wolf. I'm your host for this show. We go live every single Thursday at 5 p.m. UTC. And in today's episode, we have a really exciting guest. In fact, someone we brought on this show during our pilot episodes on a personal account we used to have. Peter Ma, who is the co-founder and CEO of Mixpose. Now, it's going to be a really exciting one for those of you who are interested in turning your tech ideas into startups, into companies, into IPOs, into who knows what else. Peter has some really good insights and information and things he wants to share with us on that. Of course, we'll also talk about his new company, Mixpose, and all the cool things that they're doing there. Now, before we dive into something like that, I usually like to kind of talk a little bit about last week's episode. I'm not going to talk about it, but we are going to share the link. So for those of you who have an extra hour in the day, please cruise on over to last week's episode. We met with Keith Lee from Gumsticks, an Altium company, and we talked about all sorts of cool stuff over there. Now, for you hardware designers, I think that's definitely an episode you'll want to watch. So really cool stuff going on there. Now, another thing, we have Dev Summit, ARM Dev Summit. Our annual event used to be, or formerly known as TechCon. We've done 1 year now, second year coming up. ARM Dev Summit is coming around the corner in October. We have a lot of really cool stuff happening around this event. If you've already received your notifications for being accepted into as a speaker or a workshop proctor for that event, congratulations. If you weren't, please feel free to reach out to me on Discord or through one of our ARM software developer channels, and we can see maybe the session that you had planned might be perfect for this live stream. Get you on Innovation Coffee to showcase the cool stuff that you had planned for Dev Summit. We will be doing lots of other really cool things around Dev Summit. So again, reach out to one of us here at ARM, and we might find a cool place or some place for you to showcase the things you were going to show. Now, that being said, we do have a surprise guest, and let's roll it. I want to welcome Rob Morey from ARM, one of my colleagues here, to Innovation Coffee. Now, there is a very exciting event that's happening, as we mentioned, in this journey to Dev Summit. All sorts of cool stuff is happening. Rob is here to share with us one of these exciting things. So, Rob, welcome to Innovation Coffee.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Robert. How are you doing? Good.
Thank you very much. And we're happy to have you here. So I understand you have a pretty cool thing happening around Dev Summit. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So in the run up to Dev Summit, we were thinking, how can we get people engaged and excited about what's going on? Because, as we all know, ARM has lots of very cool technology around. And over the last sort of 18 months with COVID happening, one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is sustainability. It's been a big aspect for ARM. ARM's got a big push going on for sustainability. I think lots of other companies have at the moment. So we thought, why not put a competition together and let's challenge the world, the engineering community out there, both software and hardware engineering, to see what can you do about sustainability. So we've put together a competition, and it's a very simple theme. It's about sparking the world's potential for solving sustainability issues. We're going to look at things like the UN global goals as a starting point, but it could be anything. And we're not limiting this to just eco-friendly stuff. So it's not all about climate change. It's not all about saving the whales. They're important issues, and we're happy for people to look at them. But there's so much other stuff in terms of getting education out to a wider audience so that people in developing countries can have access to the same sort of technology we're used to. Working at how we can make our financial system more sustainable and less likely to break. Working out how we can do absolutely anything so we have a better future in the world we're living in. So the competition is open to anybody over the age of 18. You can enter in teams of up to 4 people. You can enter as a company. So if your own company, you've got there as a small company you want to enter in, you can do that. That's absolutely fine. What we're looking for is for people to come up with a really great prototype, an idea of something that could be used to help solve a sustainability issue.
So Rob, real quick here. You mentioned at the very beginning, and we already got a question in the chat. I think I briefed you on this question that might be showing up. You mentioned that this is a contest for people over the age of 18. Are there any ways for us to get people in under 18?
I really wish we could. When we first started thinking about this, we wanted it open to everybody. ARM spent a lot of time last year with some very young innovators to see how they could be the future of tomorrow. But unfortunately, we just couldn't get it sorted out this time around. But if this competition is as successful as I'm hoping it to be, then we want to be running this every year in the run-up to Dev Summit. And maybe next year we can open it up to a much wider audience.
Rob, if I can expand on that question, and I know this might not be for you to answer, at least on the spot here, but what if someone under 18 had their parent sign up for them? Is this something that has been talked about, or is something that you might see as a possibility?
So we haven't talked about that as a possibility.
Okay.
And obviously there are always ways around a lot of the rules and regulations, but we are being pretty strict about saying you've got to be over 18. Everybody as a member of the team has to be over 18 and registered for the competition. So if anybody does come in under the age of 18 with the idea, then unfortunately, because of the rules we've had to put in place, they will be disqualified from the competition this time round. But as I said, for future years, that may not be the case. Okay,
great. Yeah, no, that answers the question. And David actually commented in the chat, what if under 18s could partner with people above 18? And there, I think Rob just answered that question as well. So if anyone on the team comes in as under 18, unfortunately, that would disqualify. Very sorry, Arijit. Sorry about that. But stay tuned for next year. There's always next year. You don't grow up too fast. I'll tell you that, because, next thing you know, you're 35 years old. You're like, where the heck? I wish I was 14, 15 years old again. But yeah, cool. Thank you, Rob. All right. So keep going. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just thought that was a good
excellent. Question. No, not a problem. So, we've got some great prizes. So we've got the first 3 prizes where the winning prize will get $5,000. Second prize is $3,000, and the runner-up or the third prize is $1,000, and this is in cash going to you. We've also just signed up to have Raspberry Pi helping to sponsor us with this competition, and they've agreed that for every entrant that wins, they will provide a Raspberry Pi 400 kit and 4 Picos. So an incredible set of prizes, and that's on top of the cash prize that's coming through.
That's really cool.
So that's very cool. We're also running some runner-up prizes. So even though you may not have the best sustainability solution that we're looking for, you may have done something that is an incredible use of ARM Neoverse, or using ARM-NN and the machine learning, or even just the best use of an IoT device. And so we want to encourage people to look at different areas and how they can use these specific bits of ARM technology. And they will get a runner-up prize, and we're working on exactly what that will be, but the likelihood is it will be for the Neoverse prize, some sort of cloud credit, so you can use more things on cloud. For ARM-NN, it'll be some sort of machine learning board, and for the IoT device, it will be an IoT development board. And of course, on top of that, you will also get the Raspberry Pi 400 kit and 4 Picos.
So a couple more questions popped up in here, surprisingly. One from our guest who's going to be joining us in just a few minutes, Peter Ma. He's like, what kind of devices do you need? And can you improve on some old projects? So can you take an old project that already exists, like something that they created on Hackster? I mean, I know Peter and various other developers in this community have created some cool, sustainable things. What if they took that and then evolved it? Right? Made it better, more robust.
Absolutely fine. So what we're wanting is something that is either a definite evolution of an existing product or completely new. We're talking about sustainability here. So if you can get some old technology and repurpose it to something else and reuse it, perfect. That's absolutely great. In fact, one of the judges, Topher White, for this competition, who's the CEO of Rainforest Connection, their main goal is they've taken old smartphones and they repurpose them to look at how they can monitor what's going on in rainforests or underwater, and check when illegal activity is happening. So yeah, by all means, bring in something existing that you can repurpose and reuse or upscale, reinvent to be a new sustainability.
Awesome. Very cool. And so I know that you're going to show us the website. We're going to poke around that real quick in just a second. But one more question did come in from Carlo. And Carlo, welcome back. I mean, it's been a while. I know since you left ARM, I'm happy to see you in the chat here. So welcome back. He asks, actually, he's asking Peter. No, sorry. Here we go. This is the question. Can it be fully software-based solutions, i.e., as long as it runs on ARM-based devices?
Absolutely. We have two criteria. It's a sustainable solution, so it's aiming for something sustainable, and it uses ARM technology. So if you're running it all purely on ARM stuff, great, that's absolutely fine.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Well, there we go. So are you ready to poke through the website, show people? By the way, for those of you who are watching, there you go right down below, developer.arm.com/devsummit-competition. But we are going to poke through this website real quick. So Rob, tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, so you can see where we're coming in. You can register for the competition here. It may seem a bit odd to register for a competition. Most people think, why don't I just submit my idea? But we want to help people with this. This is not just about sort of sending out a competition, leaving you by yourself. We're going to hold a couple of meetups where we get the sponsors that we talked about. So people from Raspberry Pi, from Edge Impulse. We're talking to Oracle. We may be able to get them involved too, to get some real people involved that you can talk to. You can ask for advice, for help, to see what you want to do and guide you through some of the issues you may be having with what's a good sustainability problem? What can I look at? How can I get familiar with using ARM-NN? Any of these sort of questions, we'll have people on hand to help you answer them. We'll also give you a link to the Discord server, where we'll have our own channel in there specifically for the competition. And again, this will be monitored by people at ARM to help you answer any question you may have so that you can come up with the best idea possible. So we don't want to leave you to yourself. That's why we want you to register, so we can invite you to all of these things and get you engaged in going through the competition, and we can help you along.
I think this is really important too, because when you talk about like hackathons and things like that, usually you're on site with the people who are judging the hackathons. And so you can kind of get an idea as like, I'm working on this particular project. This was my idea. Is it worthwhile? Like before I put all this time and effort into it, you might be able to speak to someone from the team who says, gosh, maybe if you just added this component, or if you tweak this component, it would be much more contender for the competition. So, I think that's really cool. Also, you kind of hinted at a Discord server. Very excited to talk more about that later on in the episode. I'll probably talk a little bit more about this Discord server that Rob's talking about.
Cool. So I'll leave that with you then, and I won't mention it any further. So yeah, I've kind of touched on why we're doing this and what's going on. It's just that at ARM, we strongly believe in creating a more sustainable future. If you want to find out what ARM is doing, we've got our sustainability vision, the blog, everything on there. I'd encourage people to go and look at this and find out more about what ARM is doing. And we'd also encourage you to go and look at the global goals and find out where sustainability comes in. And you can see that it covers a wide range of things. So not just from affordable and clean energy, but gender equality, education equality, health, economic growth. There are so many different things that can be looked at for this one. And we really encourage people to look at all of these different areas. We've got a list of the breakdown there, and we're going to be updating this with the new information we've got about Raspberry Pi, which happened in the last day or two. So it's all still going on, still being improved, and very exciting stuff.
Very nice. Very nice.
We've got the timelines on there. So, we're opening the competition up for registration now, but we're going to look at starting the competition on the 27th of July. We'll have these two meetups in August and September, and then we'll be closing the competition itself on the 24th of September. So you've got just about 2 months to sort of put an idea together. And remember, we're not looking for a fully finished product. We're looking at the idea and the prototype about something and how it's going to be working. We've got a whole load of stuff in the official rules to tell you how we're doing the judging, what's going on with everything, what we're expecting from people. And once you register and the competition opens, we'll be sending out a sort of getting started guide where we'll have links to how to use various bits of ARM technology, where to go and look at for sustainability ideas, templates for some of the things we're looking to get as part of the judging criteria. So to make it as easy as possible for everyone to get started and really come up with some amazing ideas on how they can deliver a sustainability issue.
Real quick, Rob, if you could, because you scroll back up there, I'm interested to see that timeline. So registration started July 6th, right? Which means if you haven't registered yet, you're almost late. The competition starts on the 27th, which is literally in about 5 days. So for those of you out there interested, I would suggest going registering now, because people are probably going to start working on this stuff in about 5 days, and you don't want to be behind behind on the innovation there. I'm curious, when is the submission? So submission closes on September 24th. Does that mean that they need to submit their final version of this by September 24th?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So the submission will be open basically from the 27th. So you can submit whenever you want. If you've done something, you can submit it. And we're aware that people may want to make changes and go, oh, I should have done that. I could have done that afterwards. So if you need to resubmit, you just fill in the form, resubmit, and it will overwrite all the links to everything.
That was my next question.
But essentially what we're asking people to submit is a link to something that we can access. So it could be, if you're doing a purely software project, you can do it in GitHub, you can keep it all private. And so long as you give access to that GitHub to devsummit.competition@arm.com, then we will be able to get in and access that and try it all out. And we will try and access these things beforehand. So if it doesn't quite work, we'll drop you an email and go, hey, we can't access it. Can you share it with us so we can get access to that link? So this means you can submit early, and you can still update changes on there as we're going through that competition period.
Very nice. So was there anything else you wanted to share before we close this out?
I think the only other thing I wanted to share, we've got some discussion on there, but as part of the judges, the main judging for the final positions will be done by Simon Seegers, CEO of ARM, Dipesh Patil, who's the CTO of ARM, so we've got some big names coming in, Topher White of Rainforest Connection, and also Hilary Tam, who is our Director of Sustainability at ARM. So there's some big names in here doing some great judging. So I'm pleading with everybody to give me some great ideas, because I really don't want to let those guys down with them giving their time to this project to help look at these solutions and see what's coming out of it.
Let's get some good good ideas submitted to the competition. So let me see. I'm looking here at another question before I let you go, Rob. I want to make sure we get everyone's questions answered here. Cesar Menezes asks, why only a handful of nationalities are eligible to participate? I think this is like regions of the world, maybe. I have not seen the rules yet, but maybe you're able to touch on that.
I don't know the full reasons behind it. Well, obviously, we worked very closely with our legal team to make sure we could have something that would work. There are different rules and regulations in different countries. That means you have to do certain things differently with how they work and what's got to be eligible to register and partake in that competition. So the countries we've listed are all have the same criteria in which we can allow this to registration happen and can work and everything else. If we wanted to extend this to a bigger list of countries, we have to work much more closely with each of those competition or with each of those countries to work out what their regulations are and have a set of rules and regulations that apply to everybody. And that may limit things down a little bit in terms of some of the prizes we could have given or something like that.
Yeah, usually, I mean, as Rob mentioned at the beginning of this, and maybe Cesar, maybe you missed it, but this is the first run of this competition, and next year you hope to run it again. And so, as we learn and evolve in stuff like this, you never know what could happen next year. Yep. And so I just suggest keeping an eye on next year's Dev Summit and seeing if your country isn't in it this year, maybe next year it will be, and keep your eyes on that, because you just never know. Cool. Yep. So Rob, gosh, thank you so much for your time coming in here, spending it with us, telling us about this competition. Awesome competition. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wave goodbye and bring Peter on?
No, that's everything. So I think encourage people to join in the competition. Register for Dev Summit. I'm working on some of the workshops there. There's some amazing workshops coming up and some amazing papers and talks going on. So yeah, register for Dev Summit as well. It's going to be a great event.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rob. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a wonderful weekend. And yeah, cheers to Dev Summit. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you for, putting this contest or competition together for our developers. Very cool.
Looking forward to it. Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Talk to you later. And now we're ready for our featured guest of the day, Peter Ma. As I mentioned earlier, he is the co-founder and CEO of Mixpose. So let's bring Peter Ma onto the show. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Robert. How are you?
Long time no see. Good. Thank you. Long time no see.
Yep. It's been a few days.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Peter is also one of our ARM innovators, which is a pretty cool thing because we get to see each other, a little more frequently than I'm letting on. Peter, real quick, I want your input. What do you think of that competition we just talked about?
I like for aspiring entrepreneurs and the hackers, it'll be great. I mean, the sustainability is almost it's almost a default topic these days. You can go to UN's sustainability goals. There's 30 of them, so you can just pick one and see which one it fits in. These are topic of these are basically the ways of how you can improve the world.
Very nice, very nice. So we'll see what kind of cool stuff we get out of that. I'm pretty excited. Now, Peter, what we usually do here, and I did kind of give a little bit of a mention of this during the introduction, but for those of you who aren't aware, before we launched Innovation Coffee, this live stream on the official ARM software developers YouTube channel, we ran the show for a dozen or so episodes on a personal account with our ex-co-host Alessandro Grande. And so it was on his personal account while we tested the waters for StreamYard and got all of our kind of ducks in a row. So here we go. Peter, you were on one of those episodes. We got to get to know you, but now that we're on the official channel, I want to just kind of do the whole origin story thing once again. So who is Peter Ma? What do you do? What kind of stuff do you like doing for fun? Just give us kind of that origin story for yourself.
Okay, so my name is Peter Ma. I'm co-founder at Mixpose. It's a artificial intelligence computer vision company that focuses on pose estimations for fitness. Things like we basically tell you what you're doing and what kind of poses you're doing, and using that to basically counting different type of reps. This can be used for virtual fitness, which we've been using for past year, and then this can be used for physical fitness, which we're heading towards. I won more than 150 hackathons in the past. I used to do that for fun. I traveled more than 50 countries by now, and those are sort of the things I basically focus on before I start a company.
Thank you, Peter. That's really cool. And you said 150 hackathons. That's like half of a year if you spent every single day of the year trying to do something there. So this, I think, is a perfect segue into this topic that we're going to hit, which is tech entrepreneurship. Now, you started off as a hacker. I'm kind of curious, what were you doing before you kind of did all these hackathons? Because you didn't really touch on that. Were you working a day job, corporate, or?
Yeah, I was just working as a software developer at a company. And one day you see a challenge and you're like, this is when mobile, because before mobile was popular, the software stacks was more towards it's more traditional stacks, so you can't really build stuff yourself. What iOS and Android enabled back then was individual developers. First of all, the companies weren't really getting into mobile, so the Apple and Google specifically focused on independent developers. Hey, because you guys we made the tools for you guys to just mess around. And I was basically, it was one of the first app basically built into the market. And then this was when Yelp did not even have an app yet. There was no, and YouTube was a very bare bone, and then it's this is where the stage was, and that opened up the innovation. Nowadays this has become a commodity. But that if you think about this 11, 12 years ago, there was no apps in the market at all. This is like a very infancy stage of the mobile.
It's hard to even think about like what days were like before this app ecosystem. But I guess if you jog your memory, it's like, wow, that was only 12 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, and then everything sort of changed from there, right? There was no Uber, there was no like none of this stuff existed. It's one of those it's one of those like ages like now you feel like old even talking about it.
Talking about before apps. I used to have a flip phone. You know what a flip phone is? But yeah, okay, cool, Peter. So I think this is what I would like to call the stepping stone towards your entrepreneurial phase. Let's call it phase of your life here. Now, you went from a corporate career, to becoming this. I want to call it the king of hackers. In fact, let me pull up this comment here in Discord from David W. Peter freaking Ma, king of contests, chancellor of challenges, his highness of hackathons. That was straight from David W on Discord when I posted the live stream today. So that's pretty cool. Let's talk about where this all started. So you said all of a sudden this ecosystem, this app ecosystem was born. Do you remember your first hackathon?
Yeah, I mean, it was hosted by, and it was sponsored by TED, and then I won that hackathon that ended up giving a talk at like TED Global 2010.
Wow.
And about how to build, like how individual developers can build apps and sort of like change the world. Because before you would need like entire team of like engineers, you need investment, you need all of that, and now you just need one person to build an app. Which is, well, right now is we're back in the stage of like traditional stage again, but then again because of the overwhelming of the commoditized market. But at that time is when the pivotal innovation exists, you literally just need one person that really have like you can push it forward. The problem was basically I found out I was pretty good at it, so I was just basically, it was because every hackathon you go, you're like you end up like winning stuff, and then eventually my entire place, everything I own aside from my house and my car was won from hackathon, one way or the other, or traded stuff. Like I got the stuff like, because at one point I was like, no, I don't buy stuff. Like it's like because everything I have needs a story about how I got it. And then because you had that mentality, I think Bloomberg wrote an article about this back in 2017 about how, because now is and then that was like a phase of my life. And also you get all the clients from the hackathons as well, right? Because you were able to build stuff quick, and people were like, hey, because this is where like I was consulting for multiple companies like the Verizon, IAC. Intel and the Samsung. So it's either like, hey, they're like, I need this quick, and I need this to be done like in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I do.
I do it in 20. I'll do you one better. 24 hours.
Yeah, that's literally. But usually, but the thing is, yeah, because that's a part, right? Like they need the stuff quick, and then they pay you a lot because you're not like almost like, dude, I'm not an employee. And then you go into the office, I'm like, dude, I'm not an employee. I don't get promoted. I don't get demoted. When there's no job, I'm on contract. So when the contract is over, you don't need to fire me. There's no job. It's just contract is over. So you get out of the entire politics of like and you just go there to build stuff. And then that was where I had it. And because of that, I was able to travel the world because you work for 2 weeks and you travel for 2 weeks.
Very nice, very nice. And Arijit asked this question here: what was your experience at your very first hackathon? I think you answered that, and it was a TED talk where you got invited on afterwards after winning the competition. So that's really cool. I want to kind of like build up towards, of course, the topic here. And so there's a couple more questions I have around hackathons, because I feel that this kind of like molded you into this entrepreneur that you are. And correct me if I'm wrong as I ask these questions. So when did you realize that you actually covered this one? So you realized that you were good at this, and so that's why you kept doing hackathons. How did all of this hackathon participation, winning in these hackathons, I'm guessing working in teams and finding teams that you were most productive with, how did all of this stuff help you towards becoming more oriented towards business or becoming an entrepreneur? When did that kind of spark just click in your head and you said, you know what, I want to actually do a startup now. I feel like I'm ready for that.
I think there is a transition between hacker and innovator, and from innovator to entrepreneur, right? So from a hacker's perspective, you're really just hacking for, short-term projects. And these short-term projects that basically keeps you forward because they give you enough awards. Because eventually, hackathon, you're not really trying to thinking long-term. You're just thinking like, okay, after this win, you got to go on next win. And then from there, you do also get a lot of clients, right? Because this is your potential of your money stream of how you survive. Because people hire you, and you got to pay bills, right? And so the winning hackathon's purpose is very different. The thing is, I think what I realized was when you start building stuff for your clients. I have my own opinions. I just don't express them because there's no point. I'm getting paid to build exactly what you pay me for, and then I don't get personally attached to the things because I don't get personally attached to any of the hackathon projects. By next week, I'll have another hackathon project. I was able to crank out like 2 to 3 projects a day on Hackster at some point. Just keep cranking out based on, and then other people start following my like module on like how to really write a guide. I'm like, dude, I was not even that good of a writer. And I was like, and that's just funny because eventually everything was right now. If you look at the Hackster, it's the standard writing. I think I was one of the first one that started that sort of writing, along with a couple others, and then that was a part, right? I mean, the thing that this is where these innovator program comes in. They're like, hey, I like your project. Can you continue to do it forward? And then and ARMS is one of them. There's a couple other companies basically offers that. Like there's a multiple, and that was part of the Samsung Champion, NVIDIA AI Innovator, Intel Software Innovator. Like I was belong to a couple, and it's belong to a couple of these fellowships, and they don't really care about your hackathon project, right? Because then it's kind of expires the moment the hackathon's over. But they want to demo, they want to showcase what you can, like what's the like in your vision, like in ARM's visions, like what is maximum potential with this project? And from there, you start building up more and more and more. And then you start evolving to business. And one of the things I was building was clean water AI, and that really got forward because Dubai's government gave me $200,000. Because I won the grand challenge for that. And you can't just take $200,000 and be like, okay, see you later. You got to start building towards it. And then on top of that is a bunch of other sponsors start giving me different type of money. And I was like, okay, now I really need to figure out if there's a real market, right? Start talking to UN, and then one of the things I found out was, okay, the people who needs it can't afford it, like people in Africa and people like in South America, and the people who can afford it don't really need it, right? There's and then it's like the States, because you chlorinate the water, and then it's not healthy. You need to filter out the chlorine afterwards, but you don't really need a $200 device to check your water quality. And there are places like Flint, which you kind of do need, but then again, to go through the bureaucracy, that's like 2-3 years sell cycle. And then you start realizing the business aspect of it is like, okay, if in order for you to survive, this do need business sense, and then this do need a growth sense in a startup sense. If you can't clearly define your customers and grow, then there's really no, you can't really bring your vision alive.
I'm trying to remember here. Now, I love that, by the way. All of a sudden you got this big chunk of money you had to continue developing, and this is where you came up with all these, let's call it obstacles and challenges that you had to face, right? It's true, you're designing or you're creating something for a group of people, but you need to make sure that, what you're creating is for those people and that those people are actually going to be able to use it. I use a little device to test the particle concentration or how many particles. I forgot what it's called. It's like TPS or TSP, or it's a particles per whatever milliliter of water. It wasn't that expensive. But you start to kind of realize, like I prod the water that comes out of my tap and it's like 400 or 500 particles per whatever. And I'm just like, that compared to my purified water, which is only a few, it's like, I'm questioning the water anywhere when you're downstream. But yeah, that's a whole separate topic. So Peter, I want to go on to talking about establishing your company, right? So right now you are the co-founder, CEO of a company called Mixpose. And of course you can go to mixpose.com to find out more about Peter's company. But let's talk about establishing your own company. Now, you could talk about Mixpose if you want, the process you went with Mixpose. I'd like it if you kind of took a high level approach to this. Someone, you just kind of put out that path, right? Hacker to innovator, innovator to entrepreneur. Now, what does someone need to do, or how do you get into this whole idea of establishing your own company? What does it take?
So I always want to create a company around, right? But the thing is, you as a hacker, I actually realized this at the very early stage. When I started hackathons in the beginning, I was actually soloing, in a way where you get all the money. I mean, you don't have to split with anyone, and then sometimes you're tired, you just don't join. But eventually, like I think it was like in 3 to 4 month period, I see other people have teams, and in the beginning, I thought that was just useless because why would you even need other people? Because you can come up with an idea, you can build it, and you can pitch it, you can do the whole cycle. But eventually, I realized, okay, this is the most important thing that you can get out of a hackathon is a long-term relationship that you can build with the potential people that you would really enjoy working with. So this is that was and then also the team can carry you when you carry the team, and the team can carry you. Depends on the different events. Different people carry, would have different sets of skills that can execute different type of projects. And we like the I co-founded the company with with Sarah and Ethan. We've been hacking with each other for almost 5 years. We know each other. We just been hacking with each other. And there is a stigma of a trust that you know how to split the money. You trust each other with money, which is really important because you don't meet a random person and trust them with money. Then you trust them with with they will take care of you. I mean that's in their best of their ability. And these are things I think that's the most important part about building a team from ground up. Um, and you can't change the world alone. I mean, you can't. I mean, everybody has a team, a dedicated team that can execute in some way. And everybody have their flaws, and the pros and cons, and benefits and flaws. And these are the things you learn over time. It's just these are like not things that you can learn on a day one. And that's the thing you learn from from the hackathon days of like, okay, how can you build a group of people that's like within, and then you can trust them in a long-term vision. In a long term, it's because you establish this relationship for the rest of your life. And once you have that, is the foundation of how you can build a company. And when we started Mixpose, we didn't really think about building a company. It was basically when we built virtual fitness back in 2019. It was just we were using AI technology. We won a hackathon. We got $80,000 out of it, and we were pretty happy. But it was after effect. It was we interviewed about 100 people. And then in January of last year, by the way, this is before pandemic. And then some people are skeptical, and most instructors that we interviewed did not even know what Zoom is. By March, with people that we interviewed was coming to us, I'm like, hey, aren't you building this virtual fitness app? And then the instructors that never heard of, doesn't even have a laptop, now are teaching on Zoom. So that
cool.
was like, and then other people are paying. So we saw, okay, there is a market opportunity. And there's direct payment, and then the establishment in the industry was pretty. They're not really a tech company, they're not thinking about like how a technology growth, and like this is something we can take on. This is a challenge that we can take on, and then and that's how the story started. And then after launching in September, we were actually doing really good. We have like 25% to 30% growth month to month, pretty consistently. And from there, Techstar found us and be like, hey, why don't you guys? We not even like we didn't even apply, but they're like, hey, why don't you join our cohort? But there's other stuff that we realized because once pandemic start winding down, is in about April we start seeing numbers just start dropping. We're like, okay, this is no way. This is a challenge you got to run as a company. Is like, oh man, it's like there are good times and there are bad times, and you got to figure out how to win through the bad times. And then how do you really find a new direction that basically everybody is aligned, as well as there's a revenue growth, because this is the stuff you don't worry about as a hacker, and as well as an innovator. As a hacker, you can always get a job. That was your final plan. As an innovator, you're just taking care of yourself, right? Because it's like, hey, you know what, this doesn't work, move on to the next project. there's nobody else involved. But as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of the people involved in this, and then you have to like figure it. It's like you're really pushed. The pressure is on. The time the clock is on, and then all these everything that's not involved in your company, including personal relationships, is formed as a distraction. And
Well,
then
we're
you
gonna,
have to.
oh, sorry, I was going to say, we'll talk about the whole kind of venture capitalist investment aspect or funding aspect for projects in a minute. I'm glad you touched on it now, so we'll get some time to talk about that as well. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, but that's a journey of a hacker to entrepreneur. How
I
we
think
found the company.
I think it's a great stepping stone. I love how you mentioned that, while you were participating in these hackathons, you kind of started by yourself and then you grew a small team, and these were people. And we met Ethan. He came on to the other show that we had, and we'll find that episode. We'll put it in the description, but very cool guy as well. Finding some of those pictures that you and him are in, all excited when you win your big checks and prizes. Pretty cool. You found a partner in crime, right? That you were able to kind of migrate with. Now, I just want to give you a little thing here. I thought this was pretty cool from Arijit. Looking back at your water project, your clean water project, says he's a team volunteer at school's STEM AI club, and that every time he has to explain AI with an example, he always uses your clean water AI project to explain it, and it motivates him a lot. So I think that that's really cool.
Wow.
Before, yeah.
glad to hear that.
mentor, global mentor here. It's pretty cool. So I want to take this question here before we move on, because we are talking about Mixpose here. Pose estimation seems like a commodity application that comes for free out of the box with most solutions. How do you make your company stand out? And I want to kind of like maybe rephrase this: is what's the secret sauce for Mixpose?
So it's post estimation is not what we do. We don't sell post estimation. There's a much other like there's ML kit. There's open pose. What we do is a layer on top. So we actually do we actually basically use post estimation, and we use those dots, and then we classify what those dots are for, right? Post estimation gives you like your body's tracking system, and then what we do is like so now I have your body tracking system. And then now what are you doing? Is this a tree pose? Is it a plank? Are you doing and then from there you can do movements. Is this a push up? Is it a squat? I open sourced the very first version of the Mixpose on Hackster as well, so you can kind of explain. It kind of explains how I did it through. But I don't use that. That's not very efficient. But that's where the starting point of it was running. That was running on the Jetson Nano. It was able to do that.
Cool.
Because then you're creating additional layer of services that's not out there, and then the final one is how do you see these things fit into a market? That's the hardest part, because a technology without a market, it's just a technology. It's just for hackers for fun. But until there's a market for it, that means somebody is willing to pay for the service. If somebody is willing just to pay for this, just pose itself, great. I mean, that's other than us, right? Like technologists, who would pay for it? You're not gonna go to like random spot. I mean, it's a cool for a demo showcase. But in order for you to actually like, then that's a part we're going through right now, because it was like you kind of. Yeah, we can talk about that later, but the thing is, like, you kind of at a point is like where this technology can apply and how can we monetize? Because without unlocking that monetization, you can't sustain a team. You can sustain yourself for a little bit, and then I'm just talking about just very little bit.
Let alone grow. Yeah,
let alone grow. You just sustain yourself through like some sponsors, and maybe if you open up nonprofit, and you gotta find your donors. I mean, that's about it. But then again, to sustain this is where you also learn so much about capitalism too. Is like you gotta get your team. Without a team, I mean, you're basically nothing. You're just another consultant. I mean, and it's just like, and then you basically go jumping from company to company, and then you have to you balance yourself out where the opportunity cost is.
There's a story that always sticks with me. Back when I was in college, I took a course called Global Teams and Engineering Services. They called it Global Ties. And one of the professors brought up a story about how, you just mentioned monetizing, finding customers that are actually going to buy this, right? And sometimes it goes beyond that, at least from this story that I'm about to say. It goes beyond just buying it, but using it. Because there was this one project that was created. If you go to like hospitals, right? You go to the foot of a bed, a sickly bed, they have the charts, right? Charts, and you bring these carts in, and back in the day, at least, all this stuff was done on paper. You had paper charts, paper folders, everything about that patient was on paper. Now, when the iPad came out, one of these companies said, "Oh yeah, well, we want to put iPads in all these hospitals now." So they did a test group. They took a bunch of iPads. They built out these, portable stations where people could take it from patient to patient and log what's happening with that patient and keep it all registered in the central database. Well, when they were testing this out, it turns out that the nurses and the doctors, they just went right back to using their old school paper ways and put their iPad and these stations in the closet. And they're like, "Why aren't you using our products?" It's just it's not intuitive for us. It's not intuitive enough. And so they built something that they thought the customer wanted. Turns out that they didn't build it right because the customer wasn't using it. And so whether or not you can get people to buy it, you can get like 100 hospitals or 1,000 schools to buy a product, but then if no one uses it, you can't scale either way because you didn't build something that people aren't using, that people are using. Yep. So I think that's also a thing to touch on. I spent a lot of time talking about that. Sorry, but
yeah, no, that's part of the product development. That's really the product manager. Basically, it's product manager. That job title was created by Mark Zuckerberg. Before Mark Zuckerberg, there is no product manager. Like nobody is in charge of a product and stuff like that. Different people create different jobs, and people don't realize that. These are fundamental things that's like never existed, and now that's like actual job. Right, and now you have the social media managers. It's like these jobs didn't really exist just about 10 years ago. There was no. If you go into a corporate, I'm like, okay, I'm the head of the social media. Like people are like, what the hell? Like, what is that? And then also these are like also the skills which I would say like, because I'm like, this is how hard you think you're getting. Like, I'm getting old. I'm like, dude, these teenagers, they can get like more engagement on social media than like these corporate heads. So you really gotta, it's like you really gotta rethink, like how are they doing that, and how, like, where do they learn the skill, and how do they, and then can they write a book, and is this skill replicable? Because it's definitely replicable because a bunch of other people are doing it. But what is that like, final core of that? That's the part where it's, you have to really figure out. As a company, you got to figure out all of this stuff, and then you're like, oh man, this is like, and then you only have like so many, you're understaffed all the time as a startup, so it's like it is a little more difficult.
Even roles like community manager. I mean, I've been a community manager. I feel like those are also pretty new roles. Developer evangelist. I mean, as far as I know, those haven't been around for, decades. They've been around for, maybe 10 years. At least I'm not familiar with developer evangelists being around for a long time.
Yeah. But you see, community manager has been there for a long time. But developer evangelists now have to learn the skill of community manager.
Kind of adapted in.
Yeah, that's a part of the skill that because you become a hybrid of two different jobs: a community manager and the developer who's actually knows the technology. That's where the job comes in, right? Because before that didn't exist. Because before the community, Barack Obama was a community manager.
And a lawyer.
And then so these are the job that was like, new job that's created. And then as a startup, because you're always on the new end, because you're taking on what's traditional, so you have to do what they can't do. And these are the things you always have to look into. Is like, okay, like how do I maximize my thing? And then this is where you start learning. It's like, holy cow, how is this 15-year-old beating me on Instagram?
Instagram. Oh my goodness. I was having fun with Instagram a few years ago, but I haven't been paying attention to mine that much lately. Peter, great advice, great insight. I want to move on here because we have about 9 minutes left to the hour. Remember when I was telling you earlier, I was like, maybe we don't fill the whole hour, but here we are with 9 minutes left. I'm not even halfway through my questions. So let's talk about funding, because we got this advice on how to get your project started, where you started, where your ideas transition from innovation into what you wanted to, what we call entrepreneurship. Can you share some details on the funding process? And what I'm looking for here actually is kind of like multiple answers. maybe like what you went through with the funding process, what others might have to go through, things you explored, also what you might be going through in the future. So could you just tell us like funding process general?
When we got funded when our numbers were really good. That's part of really helps, because end of the day, just from like I like to talk a philosophical perspective, right? Because from my perspective, like you like right now we're actually not even touching too much of the funding. We have to cut the burn rate down because we're going through going through the different strategies on how to target. We used to target B2C, now we're targeting B2B. But the thing with the funding is that you have to understand from entrepreneur perspective is that you don't use investors' money to pay to enrich yourself. That is a fundamental thing you have to keep in mind. And then you're supposed to use your revenue to enrich yourself.
That's actually, I'm really curious about this personally. So now let's use an example here, right? You at the beginning of the day say, let's just say I'm not saying this personally, but I quit my job. I have a great idea. I quit my job. My salary is gone. My insurance is gone. My well-being is gone. Maybe I didn't save enough money, or maybe I saved some money, but I get an investment, several $1 million. I know that I want to form this team. I mean, am I not allowed to draw a salary from that? I mean, I still have to
you're
pay
allowed.
myself.
I mean, don't get me wrong, you're allowed. But then again, enriching yourself and surviving is two different things. Right?
Yeah, true.
Are you allowed to draw $100,000 salary? If you, so it's from your perspective is like, hey, if you're making $1 million revenue a year, dude, like I'm not talking about profit, I'm talking about revenue, and then that's growing at a rapid pace, you can pay yourself $200,000 if you want, because you're growing so quickly, your company's growth is so quickly that you're attached to that. But then again, if your company, because at the seed stage, usually the company are not making too much yet. And at that point is like, if you start drawing the big salary towards yourself, that's self-enrichment. Right?
Yeah.
Then it becomes, I mean, and if you, a lot of it is basically internal, because if you like, so if you start doing that, and would you give someone, if you have $1 million, would you give that guy like 100,000 of your money? You have to think from that perspective.
But it is understandable. It is understandable that talent does cost money, and so some engineers, some people will require higher salaries.
That's where the team forms, right? It's like, where do you get a team that's willing to take the sacrifice and build the company further?
Yeah, that's true.
That's ultimately what investors are paying for. They're not paying you a salary because you're not really working for them. You're working for yourself. They're just there to help you. They're just assistants of there. And the second thing is that you have to basically have the mentality of like, hey, you got to move heaven and earth for this. You will make this survive. Like a lot of times, it's easier, to be honest. Like when stuff gets tough, I'm just like, dude, can you just get your money back, and then like I can get out of the situation. But then again, you're like, dude, they're not. Then this specifically, all the investors, we're invested in the team. We're invested in you, and I'm like, oh man, this is like a bit more different. This is like how you get funding once you have these mentality down. I mean, it becomes a little more easier because you kind of understand what your role is, and then ultimately, do you believe in yourself? Because when stuff gets tough, you're just like, hey, can I? I don't think for one moment like I think about, oh, you know what? Let me just extract some money and just get out of this. Like I right now, because we're pivoting right now, because I'm not even taking a salary until me and Ethan, because 3 others, I mean, on the team, they do have their financial, like they do, and they're taking like a huge pay cut as well. Until this revenue was like, we basically just don't, you got to look at your runway. How long can you sustain yourself?
I think that this is really important, because a lot of times people might be getting or diving into something a little too early, or, they might say, oh, I have this idea. I'm ready to go get funded, but maybe not yet. Maybe they aren't ready to go get funded, and they need to, explore, dig a little further and explore that runway that you just called. You have this runway. How long can you sustain? How much money do you need to sustain that long? How long is it going to take you to actually deliver your product? And, I think that, venture capitalists, people who invest in startups like this might also be thinking that. Now, for people out there who want to, go into this entrepreneurship, get a startup going, you are a founder and CEO, and I'm rooting for Mixpose. I can't wait until I see this thing blow up. You can sell it, you can keep running with it, whatever you want to do. But how do you juggle this? Like, give some advice to people out there who are kind of on that bridge, trying to get over to this new level. How do you juggle the responsibilities? I mean, you're talking about building out the tech, raising funding, trying to get your funding going, researching your customers, and you as the CEO, I know you have people helping you, but how do you juggle all this? What from transition to sustaining it?
That's a part of the team, right? The team is there basically to carry different tasks. You can't do this stuff yourself. Even with a small team, that is still a very difficult level of keeping this up. But ultimately, it and it's even harder when you go through pivot, because then you're like all pressure is on, because the market no longer like responds, and you have to look for a new market. And then I'm going through that right now. I mean, this is the part is like, oh man, I never like you never really have to go through this before. Before it's just like without funding, you just like, hey, you know what, guys, let's meet back up when we find another idea that can grow. But with funding, you're like, oh crap, like you have to have the mentality, the juggling of the work. But the thing is, you always have the mentality. Whoever give you money in your life, whoever give you $1, you give them $2, at least $2 back, right? Then
100% returns.
It's just because early investors, seed funding, they're looking for 100x. If you get they give you $1, they're looking for $100 back.
Yeah.
But if you consistently have that mentality, is like whoever give you money will get more money back than when they do. Because in the normal in a hacker perspective, that is just impossible. It's like, what the hell? Like, I'm supposed to get money from you, not give you money back. But as entrepreneur, I was like, that's different. I was like, dude, I can give Apple $1, and next year I'll get $2 back. You have to think.
Yeah, I mean, the hopes are, you're talking about like buying stocks or investing in company portfolios.
Yeah, because people are investing in you right now.
Yeah.
So they're expecting you to grow at some point, is like their money will go 100x, right? And once you have that mentality in mind, and also you have to keep reminding the team. I think the biggest difficulty is just that motivating and reminding the team, hey, we're here to give people, we're here to give people more money than they give us. And that's the part is like, once you have that, is like you define that, because eventually when you expand the team, you need specific people to do specific tasks. But in the beginning, it's just all learning. As engineers, I mean, you learn new languages, but this is the same thing. You just read articles, read a bunch of blogs, and start trying a bunch of stuff don't work, and then just read more books. And the books are actually more helpful than blogs right now. Because there's actually, this is what you're like, before you're like, why would I even buy a book? And now you're like, holy hell, I mean, there is deep knowledge, because there's surface dive and there's deep dive, and you need almost deep dive on a lot of subjects before you can even talk about this. Otherwise,
I feel like books should always be important. If you aren't reading, a few books, I want to say a few books a year, I definitely suggest more. But if you aren't at least reading a few books a year, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, but
get a few books under your belt a year.
But we tend to read books that entertains us rather than learning, right? Because this is like, and until I think I start reading business books, as when the desperation starts, you're like, oh, I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. This is when you start reading, like, oh, okay, this explains like little part, another book explains a little part. But then again, if you can, the goal is to absorb around 5 to 15%. If you can absorb 15% of a book you read, it's like, that is like really, really, really good. But if you can absorb 5%, that's usually that's usually pretty good. And if because that's knowledge that you can actually in practice, that become part of you, that become part of your style or leadership, the way how you run a company. I can't say like I'm successful. We're really going through like pivoting right now. I'm like, someday maybe I write a book about pivot, because this is like where when the pressure is on, it's kind of like, it really shows the character is like, okay, how do I deal with this stuff? And then how do you not freak out? And how do you not spread like negative energies to your team? That's a part is like, there's no books written about this stuff. It's just like, you really have to understanding your own, and understanding what is their faith. Because the end of the day is that, do you believe in yourself? Because do you believe in Apple? Do you believe in yourself more than Apple or Nvidia, or because these stocks are going like 3-4x a year right now, or Amazon? Like, do you believe in yourself that you will you will triple or your 100x within the next 5 years?
I have a title for your book, Peter. Pivot, Zoom, Tilt. Peter Ma's breakthrough on entrepreneurship.
No, you gotta get out of the hellholes like first, right? This is the point is how you gonna get out of these hellholes before you can actually learn the lessons and have a bit of wisdom. Because right now is really just the going through process of like how do you get through this. I mean that's a part, right? And it's, as a founder, usually it's a little better because I have to step up because like two other co-founders are like they are having personal, because Ethan just had a baby from last fall.
Ethan.
Yeah, like, and then Sarah's getting married. So it's like, oh, you kind of have to step up to fulfill the role. But it is a relationship you build. It doesn't really matter who which one leads. You just understand it's like they have of the team. That's the most important part. Is you have to understand that they have your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And then you do the same for them.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Peter, I want to stay conscious of your time, of course, the time of our viewers. We did go over a couple minutes already, but that doesn't mean we can't still give you a shameless plug. So this is the time. What is your shameless plug? Where do you want to send our viewers both live and on demand later?
You can go to mixpose.com. We're pivoting right now, so the things are very, the site is going to look very different very soon. Because we're basically going to be business facing. We're basically going to be B2B. We're going to become the Google Analytics for these micro gyms.
Nice.
Using camera analytics. That's a target. Like that's a market we're heading towards. So
Very
if you're
cool.
a gym owner, feel free to contact me. I'm Peter@mixpose.com.
There you go, and we'll try to get your email as well in the description. So Peter, as always, thank you so much for your time. And you're always welcome to join us here on Innovation Coffee. Settling one other thing here, iShot JR did ask, how do you become an ARM innovator? Because Peter is one of our esteemed ARM innovators. I'm going to post right here, ARM Innovator Program. You can go to this website and you can see about the ARM Innovator Program. I believe there is a way to register or sign up. But for the most part, becoming an ARM innovator is I want to say like a prestige. There aren't a lot of them in the world. We do have a cap of how many ARM innovators we can have. But get a hold of, your local ARM developer evangelist, have a conversation about it. And we will, of course, be glad to provide you with as much information as possible on how to achieve your goal of becoming an ARM innovator. And we love inviting new people in all the time. So boom, there it is. Thank you, iShot JR, for the question. Peter, once again, gosh, pleasure. Always good to see you. I'm glad you look healthy, happy, and I'm rooting for Mixpose. Let's have some fun in the future. We'll talk again.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining Innovation Coffee. We'll see you next week. Innovation Coffee live stream again every Thursday here on ARM Software Developers YouTube channel. If you like the video, smash that like button. Follow us, subscribe to the channel. Go check out at ARM Software Dev on Twitter, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us.